Hello and welcome to the Artist Loft. I'm your host, Heather Woody, and I'm here today with Mr. Allen Giardinelli. Thanks for coming on today, Allen.
Hey, Heather. Thanks for having me. I'm good.
Excellent. So I read a little bit about how your parents were both very musical people. How do you think they influenced you as a musician?
That's like earliest memories, of my parents would be a hotel room in India, opening the violin case and the smell of the musty old instrument, the way those old cases smell, and they'd be getting ready for a gig down in the lounge in some hotel, and I'd be up with the babysitter. They'd get back at 3 in the morning, and so it started early. They'd be, practicing for the gig that night, and it was just a way of life. It was all around me. My dad came from like acid rock, Gentle Giant, Jethro Tull kind of stuff, and was involved in production for RCA Records. And my mother was classically trained, was a violinist with the Boston Symphony Orchestra. So there was a little bit of clashing of styles there, and they kind of came together and started doing their own thing. I guess a mixture of like old world folk and jazz with violin, guitar, and 2 harmonies, and I kind of grew up hearing their music and the people they played with.
So you've done a lot of traveling. Mm-hmm. How do you think that traveling has influenced your unique sound?
I don't know, it's hard to say because I kind of obsess about music in stages. So like right now I'm really obsessed about gypsy jazz. Before that it was Delta blues. Before that, I can't even remember, every 2 years it's something new. So I don't know if it's really like where I am or what I'm listening to, or if one really affects the other, or if they're mutually exclusive even. But there was definitely a long stretch in India, almost 8 years between India and Sri Lanka, and I absorbed a lot of that Indian classical music. And later on, when I was older, bought a sitar and started playing sitar. And, definitely you absorb things. Music is a language too, so you absorb it just like the language and the food of where you live.
So you mentioned that you are interested in gypsy jazz. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that and how you got acquainted with it?
Sure, yeah. Any guitar player worth his salt knows who Django Reinhardt is. You can't move through the guitar world and not be aware of this amazing person. Most people's reaction to hearing Django Reinhardt is, that's amazing, I'll never be able to play that way. And then some, or just gypsy jazz in general, it's very technically demanding and it's challenging. And I guess that's what really attracted me to it. Other people, they hear that music for the first time and they have to be able to play it. And that was me. I fall into that category. Gypsy jazz is pretty much, I guess it's kind of the only genre of music that could be said to be entirely based around the work of one person, or at least initially. And that would be Django Reinhardt. It was a gypsy living in a gypsy camp on the outskirts of Paris in the late 1920s. He was already a virtuoso by the time he was like 17, 18 years old. And there was a fire in his little gypsy, the old wooden wagons. They actually lived in one of those, horse-drawn wagon, and I should say caravan, gypsy caravan. And there was a fire and he burnt his hand and most of his arm really badly. It turned into this sort of, once it healed, it was this kind of nubbin where these fingers were bent back like this. Like that, and he only really had the use of these 2 fingers, and he could sort of, this hand, these 2 fingers, and he could bend these and kind of just place these. And so it was this weird kind of claw with 2 fingers sticking out. And he, they actually wanted to take his hand off, and gypsies are notoriously paranoid of conventional medicine, so they took him back to the camp and worked some gypsy magic on his hand, and he was able to keep it, but he had to, rehabilitate in a sanatorium of some kind in Paris for like a year. And during this year, he built up a technique based around his limitations. And that's what's so special about this music. He built a new sound based on the chord forms that he could play with this weird claw shape of his hand. And it just happens that all the chord shapes that we predominantly use in gypsy jazz, they work perfect for that shape. He didn't know any of this. He's not musically trained. He could actually barely write or read. He was both musically illiterate and illiterate. Just by healing his hand and learning to play guitar again with this weird burnt claw, he developed what we know as gypsy jazz nowadays. And it's quite amazing. Right. Yeah, I do my best with 4 fingers.
Yeah.
It's a new thing for me, actually. It's been maybe 3 years since I've always been aware of the genre, but I made it a point to actually start learning and wanting to play the repertoire maybe about 2.5, 3 years ago. So it's relatively new for me, and I'm definitely just a student of the guitar. That's what I am. I'm a student of the guitar.
So I know you like to collaborate with other musicians. What's your favorite part about that?
It's just a different formula, I think, for jazz musicians. When you play in a rock band or anything that comes from the lineage of the Beatles, because that was a new formula. Before that, music was put together, arranged, performed. The whole business of music was different before the Beatles, and they came up with a sort of a new formula of how you do things. You didn't have an arranger and a songwriter, and they just, we just do it all ourselves. We'll just do it, And if you come from that lineage, you write a couple dozen songs, get in a garage with your buddies, and play them hundreds of times until you've got them memorized, and then you go out and you perform them. And that's just not the way it works with jazz music. It's more about your understanding of the material and how you can interpret it. And then when you get together, it's more of a improvisational sort of free-form experience where we all know the songs and we improvise on them. There's a language for how will we start it, how will we end it, what sort of a tempo or rhythmic treatment are we going to use? How should I put this? When I have a gig, I'll just accept it. If someone contacts me for a gig, I'll just say yes. And then I'll put out a mass email to all the people that play with me. This is where the gig is, who wants to play it with me. And whoever's, I guess, closest to that zip code and available shows up. There's a couple dozen people involved in this loose collective at this point, and it's nice to have that second rhythm guitar, which is crucial for gypsy jazz. But if I can't get it, I use a loop pedal. I do live looping, and just do it all myself. Got all kinds of people involved: harp, upright bass, vibes, tap dance, violin, rhythm guitar, all sorts of horns. Different instruments. Do you find that to create a new sound for you every time you perform? Yeah, totally. Based on the elements involved, you get a totally different sound. Yeah,
that's
definitely.
a really interesting way to perform.
Yeah, it's less boring. That was also another thing that led me to this style. I started to feel, and nothing against rock music or any other genre, and I still do play that from time to time, but I just started to feel kind of limited. No, that's not blues. You can't do those notes. Those aren't blues notes. Or that's not rock. Don't play that. This isn't grunge. You can't do this riff. And it just doesn't feel that way with gypsy jazz, although it does definitely have a very particular sound and feel. In terms of like technique on the guitar, you can just kind of do whatever you want. There's definitely a certain right-hand technique that's very particular that is in relation to that music. And that's also a very interesting thing, actually. If you look at the migration of the gypsies and the stringed instruments of the countries that they traveled through to get to Western Europe, all those stringed instruments are played with the inclined loose wrist and a very heavy pick. In the Western countries, if you're not a classical guitarist, that's not how you play guitar. You usually rest your wrist on the guitar and you plant your fingers out like this, and you grip the pick much harder, and it's just a completely different sound and feel. So yeah, there's a bit of gypsy history even just in the way that they play these guitars. The guitars are very different too. They're built differently. They sound very different. Yeah, and I'm a guitar nerd, so it's perfect for me. Thanks for coming on today, Alan. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's been wonderful talking to you. All right. I was hoping we could maybe get you over in the studio to have you play a couple songs for us. Oh, I don't play music in the morning. Thank you so much.
Georgia, Georgia, the whole day through, just that sweet old song keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia, Georgia, a song of you coming soft and clear like moonlight through the pines. Other arms reach out to me. Other eyes smile tenderly. Yet in peaceful dreams I see the road leads back to you. Georgia, Georgia, no peace I find. Just that old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia, Georgia, no peace I find. Just that old sweet song keeps Georgia on my mind. Georgia, Georgia, a song of you comes in soft and clear, like moonlight through the pine. Keeps Georgia on my mind. Keeps Georgia on my mind. I see you hurt and I lose my mind. The man you love treats you unkind. When things go wrong, so wrong with you, it hurts me too. You love him more when you should love him less. You walk behind him, you pick up his mess. When things go wrong, so wrong with you, it hurts me too. I won't stand to see you pushed around when things go wrong, so wrong with you. It hurts me too.